You have flirted on the edge. You've played with God. It's a big game.
That we should not rely on that which is natural. We should not focus on that which is natural. We should not serve that which is natural. We should not worry about that which is natural. And we should not seek that which is natural.
I tell you how they knew she was dead, because it took Jesus Christ a long time to get to Jairus' house. Rigor mortis had already set in. That girl had turned purple and black and swelling up. They knew she was dead as a doornail. But what they didn't know was the Prince of Life was coming to town. Glory! The Prince of Life was coming to town.
Salvation is not based on legalism. Honey, you ain't saved. Look at that, what you wearing. It don't look saved. You ought to wear stuff that becomes holiness. You ought to not, if you're not a clown, don't dress like one. But you're not saved because of what you wear.
I want to tell you there's nothing wrong with being a Baptist or a Pentecostal or a Methodist. But there's something wrong with letting that title become a wall. It becomes a barrier and often becomes a fortress and too often becomes a prison.
But because we were more concerned about what went on inside the walls instead of what went on outside the walls, we didn't take time to deal with folk who don't dress like us and don't talk like us and don't go to private school like our children went to private school. And the devil took time with them when we would not. We must take responsibility.
Hello, I'm Charles Brown Jr., and this is Looking for a Miracle. For over 3 decades now, church leaders have used the power of television to spread the gospel beyond the walls of sanctuaries like this one. Such a creative union between the church and television has helped the church broaden its ability to witness the mystery and miracle of Spirit-filled living. On the other hand, the scandals of the late 80s have shown that some televangelists wish to use television as a means to deceive and exploit under the pretense of holiness. But what's really amazing to me is that even after these scandals questioned the integrity of some televangelists, a New York Times article just last year confirmed many viewers still watch television ministries. Why? Well, that's the heart of this documentary. And to get to the heart of the matter, I've interviewed several past and present viewers of television ministries. And I've asked a noted communications scholar who has done extensive research in this field to give relevant analysis and interpret their responses. As a young ordained clergy person and an aspiring video professional, I hope that we uncover the motivations for watching televangelism and challenge the church to use the medium of television to the best of its ability to better serve viewers like you. Just as religious programs were some of the earliest types of broadcasts on radio, local and network television entities capitalized on meeting FCC requirements to operate in the public interest by airing religious programming as well in the 50s. Substantial control at the outset was maintained by the networks in particular over these programs, and because of this pressure, the mainline religious groups were forced to conform and compromise the presentation of religious faith. Although these groups produced award-winning programs on the networks, researchers characterize Roman Catholic Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen as the pioneer who gave preachers all over America a fever for television. Sheen's success sparked an explosion of religious programming in the years following. Rex Humbard had humble beginnings in Akron, Ohio, but soon received national acclaim, and Jerry Falwell's Baptist ministry emanated from a local television station in Lynchburg, Virginia. But in the 80s and 90s, Falwell's Liberty Empire has given him power to exert significant influence in other arenas as well. The proliferation of television preachers across the airwaves has been in part due to the worldwide success of one Billy Graham, the father of televangelism. Initially, television stations were allocated specified amounts of time and money to serve the public interest with regard to religious programming. But with limited airspace, growing competition, and a 1960 directive from the FCC giving stations full liberty to charge preachers for producing and broadcasting their programs, televangelism quickly transformed from spreading God's word to the business of building massive empires. Pat Robertson, for example, has seen the value of his Virginia Beach cable company rise to over $118 million after an initial cash investment of only $183,000. Reverend Robertson would say that his corporate investments are ordered from a higher authority, especially if God uses his empire to exorcise demonic spirits from the White House and the world. The nation, however, seemed unaware of the power of televangelists until Oral Roberts claimed that God told him to raise $1 million or die in 1987. The next year, the nation watched as Elmer Gantry was personified in the scandals involving Jim Baker and Jimmy Swaggart. Since then, many television programs have examined the world of televangelism, but today, we will draw from the hearts and minds of 5 women, 2 of whom are elderly. In fact, women and the elderly as demographic categories constitute the 2 strongest variables that characterize the audiences of religious television programs. To give our study a more diverse representation, we shall also hear from 2 men, as we attempt to better understand the sustaining success of this cultural phenomenon. Throughout the documentary, you can compare and contrast your reflections with those of Dr. Hal Himmelstein, Professor of Communications at Brooklyn College. His seminal work, Television Myth and the American Mind, the second edition of which is to be published this year, devotes 1 chapter to critiquing the capitalistic and immoral forces that have corrupted religious broadcasting. Being that each interviewee has his or her own perspective about televangelism, we began each interview questioning why they were motivated to watch religious broadcasts in the first place. Many people believe that watching television ministries help them deal with obstacles they have in life. Is this why you watch televangelism? And if not, why do you watch televangelism? Ruth Woods is an elderly lady who lives in the Senior Citizens Project in Far Rockaway, New York, and watches many different televangelists.
Because I need spiritual food. That's why. And because I don't go to any church.
You're not able to go?
Right.
Okay.
So I have these gentlemen and women who come forth.
Cynthia Rudolph has been a television industry professional for over 18 years. She used to watch Jimmy Swaggart and Fred Price Ministries, but since the scandals of the late 80s, she no longer watches televangelists.
That I am such a television consumer that I actually sleep with my television on overnight.
John Kemplazinski, a young Catholic man from Staten Island, who has lived in Israel and is applying to Catholic seminary this fall. He only watches Zola Lovett Ministries.
No, and I kind of feel sorry for people that do. I think a lot of people want this in their lives and they don't have it, so they go for the first thing that's closest to them is the television, and they look for it there. And once in a while you'll see a glimpse, you know, Billy Graham can point you in the right direction and all, but when it comes for living a day-to-day basis, you need the support of the church, whatever church you belong to.
Frances Woods, also a senior citizen, lives with her family in Brooklyn and also watches many different televangelists.
Like I said, like for me, like I say, it's good for me because since my mother has been sick and she's with me, there were times, like if I don't get my daughter, I told to come down and stay because I don't really care to leave her in the house. For a length of time by herself, there were days that I don't get out. And, you know, there were times I don't get out to church that I would like to. And when I put that on, it just lifts my day. It's perfect for me. It's not perfect, but it's good for me.
Yana Clash, a native of Maryland, now resides in Brooklyn and is a social worker with developmentally disabled children. She only watches Robert Schuller.
In particular on Sunday, when I do watch televangelists, it starts my Sunday. It starts me off to get to church and get into the spirit of worship.
Denise and Terry McPherson are members of one of the largest and most influential congregations on the East Coast. They only watch the Bethel AME Church Outreach of Love broadcast, which is the church they are members of.
When we don't go to church or miss a Sunday from service, we feel that we've missed something. And by having the ministry come to our home via television, it allows us to make up that time and to enjoy the ministry as Reverend Reed has laid down through the course of the year.
Having justified the value in watching televangelism in general, I thought it necessary to discover what it was about the particular broadcast that these loyal viewers watched that kept them tuned in faithfully. What specifically is it about the television ministries that you watch which makes them so appealing?
I like them because each one is not going to tell me what's going on in the world.
I closed the message and turned around for not giving off the call for whatever the reason, and the Holy Spirit said, turn back around and give an altar call.
What I had liked about Jimmy Swaggart at the very beginning was he seemed so very sincere. He really...
How did he translate his sincerity?
He translated it to me by being able to say, I am a human being, I have frailties, I love God, and I believe God can help me and you get beyond those human frailties. And he really put a lot of emphasis on letting God be in your life and work problems out for you.
As Israel progresses, so goes the whole world, believe me. If Israel falls apart, the world falls apart. And that's what's going to happen. And then when Israel prospers in the kingdom, so the world will prosper.
Well, I like watching Zola Levitt. He's a Jewish Christian, very Zionist in his outlook, and you know that's a little hard these days to have that opinion. But I like watching him because he has features about Israel, and because I've lived in Israel and I believe that Israel is involved in so much of the biblical prophecy of today. I see certain people that are also attuned to that. And I think this man is one of them. If he ever teamed up with the Catholic Church, you know, we'd better look out because there'd really be some great changes in the world.
The key word there is beheaded. In fact, one of the parliament members of Uganda said, I've never seen such hatred in my life as thousands of bodies are floating into our nation from Rwanda into Uganda. And the Word of God teaches, because the key word there was beheaded, that we are going to experience times when those who name the name of Jesus will be beheaded.
Okay, with Jack Venepe, they do a world like news, and he quotes the Bible an awful lot, and he gives, you know, like from the Bible, the different predictions and the things that are coming to pass. And I just basically enjoy him because I just like the way he brings forth a message.
Had no home of his own, no insurance policy, no Social Security cards, no retirement plan. He performed a miracle to raise the money to pay his taxes, his estate. He left behind only a simple robe, a cheap prize to entice the gambling soldiers at the cross.
Right now, the only televangelist that I'm attracted to is Robert Schuller, and primarily it's because I've grown up on it. Watching him, I like in particular how he brings people, everyday people like you and I, up on stage, and they share what they've gone through in life with people all over the world. You can tell that it's not made up, that it's not planned. People are just talking about what God has done for them.
Prayer helps. Turn around and tell somebody, yes, it does. Prayer heals. Turn around and tell them, sure enough. But finally, prayer gives you hope.
You don't see the requests for money or donations during the service. At the end of the service, if you'd like a copy of the tape, then you can send in a donation. But you don't see that request pop up on the screen, and that makes a big difference.
Every other word out of the minister's mouth is not, please send your contributions. We need your money. We need your financial support, because our ministry is run primarily by tithes and offering that we as members give to the church, and that is our way of giving something to the public, an opportunity to come in and visit our house, our church, and see what we're all about.
I found it very interesting that the appeals that these television ministries have for people are very, very individualized, and we saw that in some of the interviews in this program. For example, John, who says that he watches Zola Levitt, who's a Jewish Christian minister, likes the program because John lived in Israel, and the program has a number of features about Israel, and this comes up over and over again in John's conversation. Johanna Clash, who seems to like Robert Schuller and The Hour of Power above the other programs, to her, Schuller represents a sort of everyday people and has these everyday people as guests on his program. She also says that Schuller's, and I find this interesting, she says that Schuller's program seems very unplanned, and yet when I've watched Schuller's program, it seems completely the opposite to me. It seems highly structured and quite well choreographed, but it just goes to show you that individuals take away very personal kinds of impressions from whatever they watch, and no two people may see the program in exactly the same way. The McPhersons make an interesting point, and that is that their minister, who also has a television program as well as leads regular church services, does not beg for contributions, and I think by implication they would say that why they would not watch the other programs is they're constantly asking for money, and they do not like that in the least.
The scandals of the late 80s involving Jimmy Swaggart, Jim Bakker, and Robert Tilton have had a notable effect on the presentation of religious broadcasts as well as its viewership. Let us turn to the scandals now, as the issues involved cut to the very essence of using television as a means to promote religious insights and highlight televangelism's vulnerability to the unethical and the immoral. Have the Jim Bakker, Jimmy Swaggart, and Robert Tilton scandals of the late 80s affected your outlook on televangelists?
We have to remember we're people of the flesh. We could go wrong.
And so are they.
Yeah, corrupt. Yes, right. So you could get corrupt. You could be the biggest preacher, but you could be corrupted.
My feelings for Jimmy Swaggart hasn't changed. I know he asked for forgiveness. I believe God forgave him. And like he knew that he did something that wasn't right, and he begged forgiveness, and he's just going on with his preaching.
First of all, I think I look at people as people first, okay, before they're televangelists. Those people might have gone through many changes in their particular life, and the reason why they did the things they did. It doesn't hinder my feelings about moving on and looking at Robert Schuller in particular. I still consider him to be one of the top televangelists on TV.
I have so ashamed when Jimmy Swaggart fell, because I was not yet a Catholic. I was still born again, and Jimmy Swaggart used to say, all you Catholics are going to hell, and all of a sudden when all the Catholics wrote to him and said, hey, it's okay, you could be forgiven.
No.
I'm not a fan of either one of those that you've just mentioned, so therefore what their downfalls and it's being humans would not affect me, because my faith is stronger than the man, the human. My faith is in God, and the human is the person who relays or interprets that for me.
Okay. Well, even when they were on television and I would flip through, there was nothing about their broadcast that touched me, so it had no effect on me at all.
Forgiveness plays such a crucial role in Christianity, for without it, no sinner can gain access to a right relationship with God. On the other hand, all of us are to be held accountable for our actions. And because televangelism exploits the power of the preacher or teacher to influence others, you, the viewer, must be careful not to send a message that you will graciously forgive leaders that don't practice what they preach.
In terms of the recent scandals in the television ministries, especially those regarding Jimmy Swaggart, Jim Baker, and Robert Tilton, I found it most interesting that most of the people who appeared on this tape seem to be willing to forgive, for a variety of reasons, these televangelists who have, in their eyes, definitely sinned. However, one of the people, Cynthia Rudolph, argues that she can't forgive and that she's consequently lost faith in TV preachers.
And I just couldn't live with the fact anymore that this guy still wanted to preach to me about how much God loved me and how much God was going to forgive my sins. But his sins seemed to have surmounted most any kind of sinful nature I'd ever seen before. So I kind of lost my trust and faith in somebody that could fall so far, I suppose.
Actually, Cynthia Rudolph's opinion may be more reflective of the general opinion regarding these televangelist scandals in the 1980s. A survey was conducted by the Princeton Research Center in 1992 dealing with public's confidence in the nation's priests, ministers, and rabbis. And the results of that survey are quite interesting. For example, the survey ratings for clergy, which had peaked in 1985, when 66% of Americans surveyed ranked clergy very highly on standards of honesty and ethics, that rating had dropped significantly, according to the Princeton survey, by 1992. The positive ratings for clergy had fallen to 54%.
As an aspiring producer of religious programming for television, I wanted to know if there was a void in present-day televangelism's ability to meet its viewers' needs. By doing so, I believe that producers can be better equipped to develop programming that is relevant and enjoyable, as well as persuasive and engaging. So I concluded each interview by encouraging each person to offer suggestions as to how televangelism can be improved. If you had the opportunity to talk to producers of television ministries, what would you tell them to help them make programs that better meet your needs?
Well, my needs, and I think it's needs for a lot of other people, are spiritual enriching programs. They can be teaching, they can be history, they can be geography about Israel, or just cultural shows on what God is doing in other countries. I think that would be beneficial. What is God doing in our communities? I think forums would be a good idea to get people from different backgrounds together, either denominations or religions, and they could discuss matters. You could have a public call-in session, and I think that's where you can really use, I don't know if I could call that televangelism, but that's where you can use television for a spiritual purpose, for the good of the community, for the good of society.
I have a special concern for children, disabled children in particular. I think that if he could have more children, the program could be structured around maybe a couple of Sundays a month where children in particular would be focused in on, okay, and their concerns and what developmental children go through and how they feel about God because of their disability.
The suggestions that have been raised, I believe, give producers of television ministries a reference point from which they can develop better quality programming. For example, if you were to tune in to a local cable network on Sunday morning, most of you will find numerous religious broadcasts. But as Yana Clash inferred, it is not usual to find religious programs geared towards children, much less developmentally disabled children. Religious programming for children does exist, as Dancing Bear from Jewish Educational Video Productions attests to. Yet, as viewers of televangelism, we must speak to the lack of creative religious broadcasts on television. and vocalize our need for diverse programming that address diverse needs.
If we examine the people who appear in this program, we find that by and large, most of the people see televangelists not as a substitute for attending church on a regular basis, but rather as a supplement for attendance. There are exceptions, especially some of the elderly who can't physically get out and go to church on Sunday, and therefore have to rely on the electronic ministries to get, as Ruth Woods said, spiritual food. While it's easy to be critical of many of the electronic ministries today, it should also be noted that there are hundreds and hundreds of these ministries, some of them less prominent, not on as many television or cable systems around the country. And so it would be unfair to criticize all of televangelism based upon some of the abuses of its more visible ministers.
The creative union between the church and television is a complex one, full of multiple implications, some of which have been discussed in this program. For those of you who don't watch televangelism, that's fine. I hope this program has encouraged you, however, to not judge all television preachers in the same light. For those of you who do watch televangelism, I hope that this program has encouraged you to look at televangelism from a critical perspective and not just an emotional one only. Televangelism has been on the scene for a little over 3 decades. It's still in its infancy stages. It's come a long way, but it still has a long way to go. Let us commit together, clergy and laity, to raising the quality of televangelism. I'm crazy enough to believe that it can make a difference. And who knows, maybe we can make this world a better place to live.
Who's there? Who's there? I don't see anybody. There you are. Don't be afraid.
Wait a minute. Aren't you the Spoler's Davy?
Yes, I am. And aren't you supposed to be in yeshiva now?
Well, yes, I am.
Come, let's talk this over. Why aren't you in